Hi, I'm Melissa Muir. Welcome back for another Tool Time Tuesday. In this video we are working again in the Revere series. This is project number 8. Now you'll notice that we did not do project number 7, and that is because Revere already has a video that shows how to do that project. It will also be re-released later this year through Rio Grande, so be watching out for that. But for now, let's go ahead and get started on the carved band. In the book, it shows you how to make your own half round wire using 4mm round wire. What you would do is fold that over in half and pull it through a round draw plate. Now let's say that you don't have the draw plates. Maybe you don't have a rolling mill that has that half round wire groove onto it. How else can you do this? Well, really you just need to have some half round stock. And quite honestly, you could probably even do it with some square stock and not even go with the half round. But in this video, I'm going to use some wire that is already half round. It's 4mm wide by about 2mm tall. And you can order this. This would look like 6 gauge if you're ordering here in the States. So 4mm by 2mm, and that's what we are going to be starting with. First thing I need to do with this is I need to make certain that the ends of my wire is flat. So what I want to do is I'm going to figure out the position of my file. I want to hold this so that it's kind of natural, and you'll notice that I'm not holding it straight up here, but rather it is at an angle, and then I want to bring my wire into that angle so that when I file, it's just kind of a natural motion and there's no movement at all in my wrist. And you'll hear I slap it down up against the wire and push it forward. And that's going to help me ensure that I have seated my file correctly on my wire. Check that, that's looking really good. And remove that little bit of a burr right there. Flip it over, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Again, I'm going to check. I have a little bit of an angle at this one. Let's make that correction. And there we're looking good. It is imperative that we have nice flush ends on this so that when we bring this around, it will match up properly and we can solder this closed. Now I've started off with a piece that is about 60mm long, so that's going to give us approximately a size 7 ring, and I know it's hard to see on this ring mandrel from where you're at, but this is a size 7. However, what I want to do is I want to start forming this a couple of sizes smaller. So in this case, I'm going to start at probably about the size 4 ring here in the United States. So what I want to do is I want to hold this, and I'm going to use a nylon mallet, and I want to hammer just this end right here and bring that down to the mandrel. You just want to bring it around and bring it in. And we want to do this until this ring forms kind of a 90-degree angle. So you see that we still have a little bit more to go here. And that right there is looking really good. So now I'm going to flip this over and do the other side very similarly. And now you can see we've got it pretty close. It does definitely get very difficult to hold onto this because it's going to get very hard very quickly. So what I'm going to do is just use the anvil part here of my bench pin system that I have, and I'm going to bring this in a little bit. And our goal here is to bring these ends together perfectly, and I can see that they're off just a little bit, so I'll take a second here and kind of readjust that. And then notice that I'm no longer circle. Well, it never really was in the first place, but that's okay. We don't have to be a perfect circle on this at this point. Our goal is right now is just to get these two ends to meet up perfectly flush. Okay, I'm going to take some time here, and what my goal is to be able to hold this up to the light and not see any light come through this seam. So I'll take just a second here and finish getting this adjusted properly. So we're going to solder the seam closed, and you can see that I've got this kind of suspended up here. We want to just very gently come in and warm up the area that we need to warm or get the solder to flow on. Just watching for my changes in the flux. And I want to come in from the top here. I don't want to heat the solder itself, just the metal. Heating that metal is going to bring the solder up to temperature so that it can flow with the rest of it. And I just want to kind of gently do this. I don't want to overheat this metal. And there goes our solder. So it looks like we have a good join there. Quench this. And now we are ready to go take this. I'll pickle this, make sure that we've got it all nice and done, and we'll clean things up and get it rounded out. So the next step, now that we have our ring soldered closed, is to clean this up and get it resized. And this is also where we are going to find out the strength of our seam. So I'm just using a little bit of Scotch-Brite here just to kind of clean up the surface a little bit before I put it onto the ring mandrel. All right. So now what we're going to do is slip this back onto our ring mandrel. We're going to use the nylon hammer, or if you've got a little dead blow hammer, that would work as well. Keep in mind, whatever you do on one side, you want to do on the other. So I'm going to take it off and flip it around. We want to ensure that it's perfectly round. Mine is not yet perfectly round. It's getting close, but just a couple more strikes and we should have it. And that is looking really good. So now what I need to do is clean everything up and make sure my seam looks good and clean up the inside and the outside so that I no longer see that seam. I'm going to start off with just doing some Scotch-Brite on this, get everything with a uniform look all over the entire ring. That helps you see the imperfections just a little bit better. And I'm going to do the same thing for the inside. Okay, so things are looking good that way. Now what I need to do is I need to clean up the solder that is inside of my ring. This can be done with a half round file or an inside ring file. And what I'm going to do is just place this ring on here. So again, that it matches the angle that I'm sitting at and the file so that I can easily just come in here and move the file around. Notice that I don't file in just one spot. I do move that file around, and that is because I don't want to create any kind of groove here. We're looking pretty good there as far as cleaning up that solder. I'll move it around and clean up any other areas that need some addressing. And I'll continue to do this for the entire outer portion or the inner portion of the ring. Once I have the ring perfectly round, I've Scotch-Brited the outside of this. I've sanded and polished, or not even polished, but I've sanded the inside, made sure everything looks good. I want to work on the outside of this ring, just on the edges. We are going to sand a small facet into the side of our ring. It's not going to take a whole lot. This is 220 grit sandpaper. I just want to do it so that I've got a nice even facet there. Got a little bit of unevenness right there. So I just want to make sure that it's nice and even all the way around. And I'll turn around and do the same thing on the other side. All right, that's looking really good now. At this point, we have a nice, perfectly round ring. At least that's our goal, is to have that round ring. You can no longer find the seam inside or out because you've cleaned that all up. At this point now in my ring now, everything has been sanded. I have Scotch-Brited the surface. That's going to enable us to see the marks that we are going to make on this next section. If you have your inside ring shank markers, so whether you've got a maker's mark or if you're marking it with sterling or gold or whatever, now is the time to do that. If you do it later after the ring is all completed, you risk the chance of deforming the ring and it will not be possible to get that back. Well, most likely not, without distorting other things. So now is the time to make your marks and we're ready to go to the next section. The next thing we need to do is to set our dividers, and we are going to do approximately 3 millimeters. So the first thing I need to do is to take my dividers, I think I called them calipers, I apologize, but I want to set my divider to about 3 millimeters. So I've just placed one tip of my divider on one mark, and I'm going to adjust this until the other mark hits about 3 millimeters. There we go. So we're at about 3 millimeters right there. I'm going to take my ring. I want to hold it here on my block so that it's nice and steady. Then I'm going to place one tip down and I'm going to drag across to make a mark. And then I will place my tip again where I've just created that mark. And you want to do this and you want to follow all the way around the ring. Like so. And I don't know if you guys can see these marks or not. They're very, very subtle, which is kind of what we want right now. We don't want it to be anything that's too deep at this point, because if it's too deep, then we are not going to be able to remove that with the Scotch-Brite if we need to readjust where our spacing is. Take your time here. Now I'm back here to the very beginning of my ring, and I know that it's really extremely difficult to see this. I only have about 2 millimeters between my first mark and my very last mark. So we're off from that 3 millimeters that I was after. So I have two options. Either I can take and kind of fudge the measurements right here around this, or in my case, I'm just going to go ahead and take my Scotch-Brite. I'm going to erase all of those marks, because like I said, I did not do them very dark, and that Scotch-Brite is really going to help those marks show up nicely. Okay, so those are all sanded out now. So I'm going to take my dividers and I'm going to adjust my measurement, and I'm going to make it just a little bit smaller. So maybe I'm a little closer to 2.5 millimeters. And that should really help. Now, a little less than a millimeter or half a millimeter. Doesn't seem like it's going to be that much. However, when you take that and you multiply that over 20 marks, that can add up to a huge difference. So this really does take a little bit of patience and trying things out. You could, figure out what the diameter of your ring is, or that outer perimeter, and divide that up, and come up with a calculation that way. But in my case, I'm not going to go quite that technical. I've just erased the marks, and now I'm going to adjust and go back and do it again. Another thing you can do if you really want to be able to see these marks well is you can just take a Sharpie and run along the outside edge of your ring, like so. And now when you go to create these little tick marks, it's going to show up very well. So again, I'm going to pick a starting point. And once more, I'm going to work my way around that ring. And this time I was spot on. So I ended up right where I needed to be. You guys can barely see those tick marks, but I think you can see them there on the video. So we now have that, and that is fantastic. Our next thing we need to do is actually mark these a little bit deeper, and we are going to do that with our jeweler's saw. So I have a 3/0 saw blade in here that we're going to be using. This next step can be a little bit tricky because we want to come in at a 45-degree angle. Now that doesn't seem like it's that bad, but for whatever reason, as I tend to go, I tend to flatten out a little bit. So it's imperative that we really try to stay at that 45 on here. Now I'm going to alter my bench pin a little bit so that I can set my ring in here and it'll be a little easier to hold. So I'm going to find one of those marks that I've created, and notice that I'm really trying to support everything right here. So my fingers are nice and solid underneath my bench pin, and I'm also going to use kind of my fingers. I know this is harder to see because I think it's out of the picture, but I'm going to use my other hand to stabilize the hand that has the jeweler's saw. And what I want to do is I want to just come down ever so slightly on one of these marks. And just let those teeth catch. And there's my first mark. It's at a 45-degree angle. So I'm going to pay attention to the spacing and the positioning of this so that I can keep this angle and come down to the next groove or tick mark and make another little mark. So there's my first two. Again, bring it down to the next tick mark, paying very close attention to the angle that we're holding this saw frame, and also paying attention to the spacing in between each of these marks. So you can start to see that coming together right now. So I'm just again barely hitting the surface of this. I'm not going too deep at this point in time. My goal here is just to get that layout, make sure that those marks are going up at that 45-degree angle and that things are spaced appropriately. So take the time and go all the way around the ring on this. Now that I've gone around the first time, you can see that I've created the different tick marks on here, and you can see that they are, for the most part, pretty evenly spaced. There were a couple that I messed up on, and then the angle changed a little bit, so I made sure that I recorrected that angle. The next thing we need to do is we need to take these saw marks, go a little deeper, and we want to bring them all the way down, keeping that angle all the way down to the outer edge of the ring. So to do that, again, I'm going to place my saw frame here into one of my marks, and I'm going to come just a little bit deeper. I want to go down about the deepness or the thickness of my saw frame, and I'm going to bring my piece, just kind of wrap it around a little bit to bring that mark all the way down to the outer edge of that ring. And I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but we want to come down all the way to the bottom. So you may have to move like how you're holding the ring and whatnot, but again, we want to keep that angle. I'm going to turn this around so that I can bring this down here on this other side. This does get kind of tricky, so you want to have a firm yet gentle hand as you're doing this. And there is my very first one. It goes from the outer edge, I don't know if you guys can see that, from the outer edge on that side to the outer edge on this side. And I'm going to do this again all the way around the ring. So again, I'm going to bring that next. Reposition however you need to do this. Because we don't want to lose that 45-degree angle as we come around the edge of that ring, which is very, very easy to do. And if your saw strays a little bit, it's not the end of the world, because we can correct some of that as we are doing the filing. The goal is to get everything in place first. Okay, there's two. And again, like I said, I'm going to continue around the ring, making sure that everything stays evenly spaced. So once you've gone through and you have cut your lines in, you want to make certain that your spacing is pretty even. Now, sometimes when you are doing these cuts, the saw blade can kind of slip or maybe not go quite into the right spot. And a little bit of that can be fudged by when you use your files. You can kind of move those marks and clean things up. But you do want to try to get it as close as you can. So one of the things that we are looking for here on the edge of the ring, I want to make certain that those cuts come all the way around the side of that ring and into the back. So if I look at the inside of the ring, and I don't know if you guys can see this very well on the video or not, but if I actually look inside, I should be able to see the notches here along the edge of the band from the inside of that ring as well. Once we have this, now it is time to start filing. So I'm going to support this on my bench pin. Now if you need to make some alterations to your bench pin, do that for whatever you need to do to make sure that you can hold this all into place. But I'm going to use that corner of my square file, and I'm just going to follow along that sawed groove that I've created, like so. And you are going to do this again all the way around. And what I'm trying to do here is to create kind of a V along this slot that we've created on both sides. So we're going to watch this flat part right here of our ring top here to begin to narrow down and kind of come to a point. So I want to take the time to get this, do this all the way around the band. I find that it's easy for me to come in on one direction like so, and then if I flip my ring around, I can come back in from the opposite side and help to match up the look of what I'm creating here. And again, I'm going to do this all the way around my ring. Once we've gone all the way around this ring and we have all of our little grooves cut into it with the square file, then I want to switch to a triangle file or a three-sided file. And the reason for this is it's going to allow me to get a little different angle into here where this is where we kind of spread things open a little bit further. And again, you want to make certain that you get all the way out here to the outer edges of this ring and bring that all the way into the bottom of your band, and just kind of make sure that you move it all the way through. So once again, I'm going to take this file and now work my way around the entire ring again. And again, I find that it's helpful for me to start on one side of the ring and then flip it over and then do that opposite side and meet the points that I've just created. And that allows me to really tip this onto its side and get down to the band, the bottom end of that band. So as you can see, this is a very time-consuming process, and it's just going to be one that you're going to have to work through to get the skill down for this. And luckily there's a lot to do, so you will definitely get this skill down. Then after this, then it's really getting to be fun, because then you can start to think of different patterns that you can then carve into your rings. So as you can see here, I've now gone through with both the square file and a triangle file. My goal is to keep everything pretty consistent, and for the most part it is. Like some of these have kind of a flat facet on those currently, and that's just where I didn't quite bring the file into that quite yet. So what I'm going to do now is I want to switch to a barrette file. A barrette file is one that has a flat side on it, whereas like this one right here is a half round, so it's flat on one side and then it has the flat facets, which are called blind edges on this file. So what I'm going to do now, and you might find it helpful to actually put this into a ring clamp, or however you want to hold this. I find that it's helpful to have some magnification while I do this, because that way I can actually see what's happening a little better with the metal. If your eyes are not nearly as old as mine, then maybe you won't need that. But I'm definitely at a point where I do. What I want to do here is just follow this rope pattern all the way around with my file. I want to use the entire length of my file. As I come across, I'm also coming over the top of my rope pattern, and that is going to round that out beautifully. And again, this is a very time-consuming process. Take your time, pay attention to what's happening. Little movements can be changed and corrected before it becomes something big. So just kind of take the time, watch what's happening, and make corrections as you need to. Another thing you want to do too is you want to address the ends of this, and I like to do that with the tip of my file, and I just want to come in here and work around that edge and make it nice and round as well. Because if you recall, we had filed a small facet or sanded it in when we were getting first started marking our grooves. So you just want to make sure that everything flows and follows along. And you're just going to continue to do this, and you can see here I now actually have a really nice rope pattern going. Everything is consistent, and if it's not, then I can easily come back in. And like I said, I want to just make small movements as I go and correct as I move along, so that there's nothing too dramatic that will need to be done. Once you've gone around this entire ring and you have things kind of laid out the way that you want to, make sure everything is nice and even, then you want to switch to a number 4 barrette file and go back over everything and smooth it all back out. So like I said, this is quite a process to go through for this ring. If you couldn't tell by the wardrobe changes and everything, this actually took me a couple of days to do. So be patient, but take the time to do it right. Go nice and slow, make little small adjustments as you're going along, like I said, so that way then you don't have any big adjustments that then need to be made. And here's the final ring after a nice polish. I hope that video helps to explain how we do this carved ring, and I look forward to seeing some of your creations. Now that you've done one, it's time to get to work and try different patterns, see what else you can come up with carving just with your file. If you like the video, make sure you give me a thumbs up, please subscribe and ring the bell so that you know when I've created new videos for you. As always, I will include links to some of my favorite tools that I've used here in the video so that you can easily locate and source some of those. Have a wonderful weekend, guys, and I will see you guys for Weekend Jewelry School.